This meeting come to order. Today is Tuesday, February 28th, 2017. This is a study session of the Prescott City Council. Welcome, everybody. We got 3 items today. I think I'll give an opportunity for the public. We don't have a whole lot of people from the public here today, but I'll give the public an opportunity to talk on all 3 of these issues today. Roll call, please.
Mayor Oberg.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lemerson.
Here.
Councilman Blair.
Yes.
Councilman Lozelle.
Here.
Councilwoman Orr.
Here.
Councilman Siska is absent excused. Councilwoman Wilcox.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. First item, please.
Wastewater centralization presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Henry Hash, Public Works. Thanks for allowing us to be here before you. In 2015, we made a presentation before the council to talk about the options, about whether to upgrade the Sundyke plant or centralize. It was more beneficial and more economically, as well as environmentally, to go ahead and centralize and eventually decommission the Sundyke plant. And that was your direction to us about a year and a half or so ago. We have been working towards that goal since, and I thought it would be a good time to give an update to you, where we are with it and where do we need to go from here. So that's one presentation. We also have another presentation by Mr. Oroz on Marina Street reconstruction. You know, you expressed a desire for us to come to you and tell you what's happening, and we certainly would like to see your views and direction and options, especially on Marina, going to be some road closures. But Mayor, with your permission, I know it's been your desire in the council that when we have key staff members, new one hired, I should bring him and introduce him to you. So I would like to do that. First of all, we have Mr. Scott McClinton. He's right there. Scott is our new water superintendent, a really key position in charge of our water. Scott was promoted to this position earlier this month. However, he is not new with the city. He's been with us for almost 20 years. Great history, a great employee. He started as a temporary full-time in 1997. Then actually the position became available in our traffic. A year later, then position became available in water. He moved in there in 1998 and has been there ever since. So we want to congratulate and thanks, Scott, for being here. The other new position, we have Mr. Eric Bay. He's our Senior Infrastructure Analyst. And that's the position that was held by Mr. Craig Dossett prior to his promotion to utility engineer. Eric has been with us for about 6 months. Great addition, a great attitude, brings wealth of knowledge from the private sector, and really he has been a key member of moving our projects forward, especially when it comes to our utility projects. Because we have full trust in all his qualification skills, we have really for the most part put him in charge of the biggest project yet to come, centralization. You know, Mr. Craig Dossett, of course, as a utility manager, he's in charge and he used to do it, but now he has a more responsible role and he needs to manage the division. So Eric is the one going to be in charge of this project. And he has promised to me that by year 2020, we should have Mayor do a ribbon cutting. With that, I would like to ask Eric here to basically walk you through where we are and give you an update.
Thanks for the introductions.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. As Henry said, my name is Eric Bay. I'm the Senior Infrastructure Analyst in the Public Works Department. And I'm just going to be giving a brief presentation on the centralization project today. So without further ado, so we're all up kind of on the same page here. City of Prescott currently owns and operates 2 wastewater treatment plants. We have our Sundog plant, and we have our airport plant as well. 2015, as Henry mentioned, we brought a plan to the council. Council approved it. This plan was to take all of our flow, ship it down to our airport plant. Then we could decommission the Sundog plant. This would save us on operation, maintenance, electricity, personnel, permitting, etc. The list goes on and on. So with the green light, we did what any prudent department would do. We developed a roadmap, and here it is. So as you can see, centralization is an enormous undertaking. It starts near downtown on the upper left of this exhibit, near the green, and it flows all the way up the 89 corridor down to the airport plant in the bottom right-hand corner of this exhibit. And with a project of this magnitude, getting it all done in one fell swoop is nearly impossible. So what we did was we broke it down, smaller CIP projects, steps, if you will. And I know what you're thinking at this point. Wastewater is awesome. This project sounds really cool. Tell us more? Absolutely. So, step 1, airport trunk main. This was about 3,000 linear feet, 36-inch, centrifugally cast fiber reinforced polymer mortar sewer main with 12 manholes. Currently under construction, completion date next month, March 2017. And the construction cost for this, we pulled this one out early for a couple of reasons. It was going through the Walden Ranch area. The developer paid the $1.5 million price tag and then was reimbursed $1.2 million by the city. So right away, by pulling this project out front, we saved $300,000 on the overall project cost. And we saved the headache of having to go back in later, chopping up new roads, going through existing utilities, so on and so forth. So step 2 is going to be a force main, 8,600 linear feet of 22-inch force main with an additional 2,400 linear feet of 12-inch force main. And this is on the 3 o'clock agenda for council approval for construction, fully designed. Bid price came in at about $2.4 million for this force main that runs up the SR 89 corridor. And every force main needs a lift station. So this force main will be pumped into by a 2.4 million gallon a day lift station at the Sundog plant. This project is also designed and includes a junction structure at Lillian Lane where we will transition from force main to gravity sewer and then convey our wastewater all the way down to the airport plant. This is also on the 3 o'clock agenda for approval for construction today, price tag of just over $2 million. Moving forward, step 4, another force main project. This one starts near the VA hospital, approximately 3,600 linear feet, also 22-inch HDPE force main. A special feature of this alignment is going to be the Granite Creek crossing. This one is yet to be designed, but is on council agenda at 3 o'clock today for design approval at a price tag of $220K. That's design and post-design services. And as I mentioned before, every force main needs a lift station. We have the SR 89 lift station, which is going to be an 11 million gallon a day lift station near the VA hospital, and the final 450 linear feet of 22-inch HDPE force main, which kind of completes the circuit. This is going out for council approval today at 3 o'clock for design, with the design and post-design services coming in at about $600K.
Okay, we have one question.
Yes.
Councilman Blair.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question. Running all these 22-inch, 24-inch, all the different piping, where is that going to be laid? Is it going to be in the middle of the road, off the road?
So both. The first one, if I step back a couple steps here, Phase A, Sundog trunk main, that's going into the shoulder of the road. The picture on the bottom shows the alignment on the SR 89. Once we get up to the Watson Lake area, we're going to come off the roadway briefly and kind of go around the roundabout. We don't want to tear that up. After that, as we continue north, we will hop into the center and be doing night work there. We've requested night work as one of the council items.
And that's going through the Dells?
That will be going up to Lillian Lane, so the beginning part of the Dells.
Okay.
And then we will cross the road completely put in a junction structure, and then it will be gravity sewer from there to the airport plant.
Okay, thank you.
And then this force main, going from the VA hospital up to the Sundog area, will be located, as you can see in the bottom picture there, primarily in the center median. So there'll be minimal interruption to traffic.
How are they going to handle crossing those bridges? Are they going to do a suspended pipe on the side?
So that was one of the options that we looked at, and that's not the option that we're going with. We have included in the force main contract Watson Woods Crossing, which was looked at extensively for dewatering and constructability, and we decided that out of the 10 alignments that we looked at, we have the best one.
Okay.
So yes, wrapping up with the Phase B force main, 8,600 linear feet, fed by the SR-89 lift station. I kind of went through this one already. And then moving into the future a little bit, we have another 2 miles plus or minus of various size gravity sewer main. This is going to be closer to the downtown area. This is some upsize and some relocation to take care of some pipe sizing. This is coming up in the near future, fiscal year 2018, 2019. And then steps 7 through 10, I grouped them all together because they're all future design and construction projects. The airport trunk main, step 7, is going to connect to the south side and the north side of the Walden Ranch portion that's currently under construction. The step 8 is going to be our effluent bypass conversion and tank along the SR-89 corridor and the tank near our existing effluent pump station. Step 9 will be the equalization ponds at the Sundog plant to handle the heavy wet weather flows once the plant is decommissioned. And then finally, this is where the rubber really meets the road. Sundog decommissioning, we'll start realizing those savings in personnel operations, maintenance, et cetera. And these are all future design, fiscal year 2018. We say fiscal year 2022, that's what's budgeted. I know Henry said 2020 earlier. We're working to move it forward as quickly as possible. So this is kind of a summary of everything I just told you. You can see our steps, 1 through 10, the project descriptions, and then how we're doing. We got projects under construction, going out for construction approval, going out for final design approval, and then our future projects as well, and then our anticipated construction completion dates over on the right-hand column. And back in 2015, we came to the council. We estimated that centralization would cost approximately $42 million. Just an update on that, $2 million will be spent by the end of fiscal year 2020. We're going out for $5.5 million just today with Phase A, Phase B, and the lift stations associated with it. And then we have $34.5 million remaining to complete the centralization project. And some of the funding for this right now, we're securing a WIFA loan of $19 million. And we currently have $8 million in our wastewater fund. As you can see, that doesn't equal $42 million. Thus, we're spreading it out over multiple fiscal years. And with that, do I have any further questions?
Councilman Lozelle.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Eric. Mark, I just want to make this clear, say it every time, this $5-6 million where this price tag is cannot be used for PSPRS, is that correct?
Yes, it's in a separate enterprise fund from the wastewater rates that all of our citizens pay.
It's restricted by law. We cannot take this money and spend it.
Yes.
Other than for what it's intended for.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I have another question also. The decommissioned Sundog Ranch or Sundog facility, when that is decommissioned, will it just cease being a water treatment plant?
So some of it will still be there, and we will still have the land. Some of the land is going to be repurposed for the equalization ponds, and some of it is already under plan to be repurposed for our lift station. So there still will be a site there.
Oh, and it'll have a public works function.
Yes.
One of the things that I don't see it geographically in my head, could that facility be in some way used to clean as the lake, the creek water goes to the lake, clean that water in any way?
That's not anything that I've looked at yet. I would have to talk to our utility manager and look into that, but I know that we haven't done any research
Okay.
as far as water cleaning at that site.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Eric, I like brief presentations. That's very good. I say that out loud on purpose, okay? And I liked your response to Councilman Lazell when he said something to you and you said, not yet. That left for interpretation that maybe we'll look at that. So I like that a lot. To date, just for edification, do you have any idea how much within the last, let's use 10 years we've invested in our infrastructure, sewer infrastructure? I know we have 34 million, I guess, left in the account. And I think, if my memory serves me right, we started out on this endeavor with maybe projected $83 million worth of expenses. I can't remember. But, from time to time, it's always good to recap all of these things, what we've been doing with the public's money, especially when we talk about basic services, of which sewer's one of. And so that they understand that not only are we investing their money in the upgrades, we're investing the money in the maintenance. And that brings me to the second question I have with regards to the modeling, because I think we put in a maintenance model system here not too long ago, maybe 3-4 years, maybe 5 years ago, to give us an idea what we keep. So if we could just get a little bit of brevity and chit-chat over what we're doing in that regard so that the public knows coming down. I know we talked about we're going to spend $3 million here, $4 million there, $5 million there, that type thing.
Yes, I know that we have the model on the docket. It's due for an update, and it helped us significantly with capital improvement savings. Also, to your first point, I do have already prepared a utility replacement presentation of about the same length. So at any time that you guys would love to have me back talking a little bit more about our water and wastewater utilities in completion, we have close to $1 billion in assets, and they need to be maintained and replaced at some point.
Thank you. $1 billion worth of sewer infrastructure assets. Is that what you're talking about?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
So the public really needs to hear how we've invested some of their money with their rates. They need to know, and they need to know moving forward that we're not going to let that stuff just fall apart simply because some people think we spend more money than we should.
Exactly. And the $1 billion, for clarification, is the total of water and wastewater assets.
Thank you.
You also had the question in regards to money spent recently in regards to wastewater. In the last 5 years, there's been approximately about $50 million invested in the wastewater system between the airport water reclamation facility, cured-in-place pipe projects, replacement projects like Lincoln Street and such, so just in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think it's important for the public to hear these things because, handling all that stuff doesn't come for nothing. I mean, it takes a lot of money to maintain the infrastructure, to put in the infrastructure, et cetera. And I don't think it's out of line with a community of a base of about 43,000 population. The one thing that I didn't get to was growth projections and capacity. The system that we have now was based on a capacity of handling how many people?
So with current flows, the airport water reclamation facility has a fair amount of additional capacity available. As we start into centralization will take up that capacity and will trigger the need for us to do phase 2 at the airport. However, if we weren't doing that route, then we would be in the situation to need to expand Sundog. So this is a matter of being able to expand one facility instead of both of them. Current population, I do not have that right on the top of my head.
Okay, I guess I didn't ask my question very well. Having been familiar with the general plan and having gone through 2 of them, and having been acutely aware of our water resources and alternative water resources, and the projection was that we would have the water available for a build-out of approximately, unless things change, we get water from somewhere else or whatever, we would have the water for a projected build-out of approximately 73,000. I guess my question is, the plant that we're designing and maintaining, are we designing and maintaining it to handle that kind of capacity?
That's correct. The airport water reclamation facility, when we did phase 1 expansion, we have it set up so it can go as far as 3 phases, and it will be able to handle full build-out population.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
If I may, to clarification, Mayor Pro Tem, I did look at the numbers you asked about a couple of years ago. I may not remember them exactly. With centralization, we are going to go to phase 2 of our airport treatment plant. The plan was designed in as good as anything could be designed. It's very easy. Just add steps 2, 3, 4, 5. My calculation about 2 years ago, if I remember, once we are completed with the centralization, we're adding phase 2. I believe we are good if water is available for the waste treatment plant, up to 6,000 people, which is going to be a long time from now. I wouldn't be doing phase 3. Maybe you'll be sitting here, but it wouldn't be me. And as far as the funding, as we speak, I know council was very prudent to look at all the available funds to deal with some of the issues we have in the city, and wastewater was one of the funds. As we speak to you right now, we have about $8 million in the wastewater fund. If you be so kind to approve our agenda item in a couple of hours, will be $8 million minus $5 million, leave us about 2, just for clarification.
Thank
The
you,
rest
Henry.
we need to borrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the council? Anyone from the public? Okay, thank you. Item B, please.
Presentation by Public Works of the South Marina Street Reconstruction Project.
All right. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. My name is Steve Oroz, Program Development Manager, Public Works. I wanted to give you a brief presentation today of our imminent South Marina Street Improvement Project that's coming very soon. It should be going out to bid next month in March. I wanted to brief you on what's included in the project and then go over some construction options that we'd like to get some feedback from council on of how to move forward. The project consists of Marina Street between Gurley and Goodwin. It includes pavement reconstruction, water, sewer, drainage improvements, landscaping, streetscape enhancements. We do have another biobasin that we're including in this project for water quality, making some pedestrian and other safety improvements, all part of the project. This is a fairly small outline of the project. On the left, let's see if this works, there it is. On the left side over here at Goodwin, that intersection improvements will be part of the Goodwin project that we talked about last time over by the library. As we move down to the north, we'll be replacing the pavement, improving the landscaping, enhancing the parking and landscaping that's already there. Moving to the Union Street intersection, where we're right now, the intersection is a big, wide concrete intersection. And what we're trying to do is make the intersection more compact, safer for pedestrians, better for traffic circulating, improving the walkways and identifying them there with the stamped concrete paver looking, similar to what's around the square, to give it a downtown feel. Adding some landscape planters in the center here to try to break up the mass of the intersection. Moving north, adjacent to the county building along here, Right now, it's unimproved. Cars park all sorts of different directions. There's no sidewalk. We've been working with the Downtown Partnership and have worked on a plan to have a sidewalk installed along there and a few parallel spaces. The biobasin is up in this part of the Gurley intersection to catch the water as it flows northward before going down Gurley towards Granite Creek to improve the water quality. Then we get to the intersection with Gurley. Again, doing the same sort of intersection treatment that's on the square, the stamped concrete paver look, making the intersection as compact as possible, improving the walkability of the intersection, doing a few minor water line improvements near that intersection as well. So that's just a brief overview of the project. The engineer's estimates about 1.2 to 1.3 million. Two of the key features of this project are the Union intersection and the Gurley intersection. In order to construct the project, we're looking at a variety of traffic options to get the project built most efficiently and with the least amount of disruption to the public. We do have Union Street, which is primarily a parking area, but it does involve circulation to and from the square. To construct this intersection, we're looking at 4 different options, or actually 3 different options. The first one is a partial closure of Union and Marina, which would mean one traffic lane in each direction while we're constructing. The downside to that, it's going to take a lot longer to construct. Longer construction time means higher cost and more disruption. So we're looking at that option, which is traditionally what we try to do is keep traffic flowing as much as we can. Another option is to close Union about where the crosswalk is. I think it needs a new battery. On the west side and at the east side, where those 2 large islands are in the middle of Union, and keep the circulation parking open on both sides, but allow the contractor to get in and build those 2 intersection improvements and half the main intersection at a time, then flip it around and open that direction east-west, close Marina to let them finish up whatever is left. Again, that's going to take, we're estimating about a 6-week construction window. Still trying to give the contractor enough time and room to get their work done, but still an inconvenience to the public. The last option that we've considered is closing the intersection, let the contractor get in, have total control of the intersection, get the work done, and then reopen the intersection as soon as possible. We're looking at that as the most time efficient. We're estimating it would take about 4 weeks of time to reconstruct the intersection, which would mean the intersection would be closed 24/7 to vehicles. There may be times when the roadway could be open, but right now, until we get a contractor on board, we don't have those details, but we wanted to get feedback on those options. Similarly, Gurley is in the same boat, so to speak, where we have to look at the intersection. One of the differences is that in Gurley Street, we have 5 travel lanes of area to work with, so the option of a partial closure or Marina only, keeping Gurley open all the time, might be an option, but again, the longer the construction time, the more inconvenience. We're aware that the Hacienda Hotel is right there on the corner. Nighttime work is probably not a viable option, but we can explore that with the hotel owner, and maybe there might be a couple of days where we could give the contractor that opportunity. We don't know yet, but we're just exploring options with council. The other thing that we're aware of is that as this project's going out to bid here in March, probably before you in early May for construction award, is that we're coming into our busy downtown season. We don't want to affect sales tax. Mark will hurt me. So we're looking at starting sometime after July 4 with the intersection work. After some of the major events occurred during the Frontier Days and the 4th of July celebrations, we're looking at that. We're trying to minimize impacts. So we're looking at a variety of options. Most of the detours, when there is a closure, is only about a block, going around on Alarcon, Cortez, Sheldon, Goodwin, around this area, so it's not a huge inconvenience. We're going to try to maintain pedestrian access throughout the whole construction time. So it's going to be a mess for a short period, but it'll be really nice when we're done. I wasn't here in the 80s when we did the square, but I'm sure it was also a short-term construction problem when we did all the brick pavers around the intersections at that point. As part of this whole thing, we're looking at changing up how we award the project on this one and future downtown projects, including in our evaluation of the bids, in addition to the lowest cost, look at the least amount of time. Have the contractors do some thinking and try to give us some options. How can they come up with constructing the project in the least amount of time with least amount of disruption to residents and the businesses? So we're trying to explore a lot of options here. So we're looking for input from the council.
Does that complete your brief?
That's the brief presentation.
Are you going to be establishing more parking, or are we going to lose some parking
On this particular project, we will be losing a few spaces.
Okay.
It's mostly on that the edge right now where it's by the county building where it's dirt right now, and there's a lot of parking that's here and there. That's just one of the downfalls of this particular project. Overall, Alarcon is adding spaces. Goodwin is adding spaces. That's where Bashford is neutral. So we're trying to increase parking, and we were aware of this, and this one unfortunately does have a small loss.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Wilcox.
Thank you, Mayor. With regard to closure of the streets, it seems to me that total closure of Marina could be handled all right.
Okay.
With reroutes. It's not as heavily trafficked. But total closure of Gurley, I think, would be a nightmare, because you have so many tourists coming in, and they don't exactly know where they're going, and to steer them off into a detour may steer them actually away from downtown or the event that they're looking for. Also, I would really like to see big signs when we have street projects going on like this, like the one at Larkin, that say, "Your sales tax at work, thank you."
We can look at that.
Lozelle.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Gene about the Marina and Union. There's probably a handful of businesses, as long as I think there's pedestrian to those businesses and the communication with those businesses, it's probably easier to just rip the Band-Aid off and just get it done. But the Gurley Street project, my opinion, I very rarely like to get into the street matter because everybody's a streets expert. But I will tell you, during that time, after July 4th, you will have a very wet season. And you know what that is?
Yes.
I mean, they've got the soil underneath has to have a certain moisture content. They've got to either move the dirt around or not, or just cease work altogether.
Right.
So that could just go from, proposed 6-week schedule to 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, depending on the weather. So that's just something to consider when you're doing something that time of year.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. At the risk of coming close to a quorum, I agree with Gene, too, on some of this. And Lozelle down here at the other end. I am a business downtown. And I do have a special interest concern over what takes place downtown. Not just for me, but, I was elected by the people to concern ourselves with different things. One of the things we've been finding out more recently than not, sometimes times and low bid aren't always the best option for value. Hopefully, when we set up the specifications, we take into consideration at the end of the day what kind of product we're getting for some of the money and some of the time, either we're willing or unwilling to spend. When we put out the bid specifications as to what we really want to try and accomplish in the downtown area.
Yes, that is correct, and that is, when we have our criteria for evaluating bids, the dollars is a major criteria, but we also look at performance on past projects, not only for the city, but for other agencies in the area. We check out references. So we do look at a complete package to determine a contractor is responsible and responsive with their bid, not just you're the low dollar, you get the job.
Thank you for that edification on the floor of the Hallowed Halls of Freedom, so to speak.
Thank you.
A couple of things. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Lamerson, for bringing it up. We need to learn from our experience, and we have learned. So past performance is going to be a big criteria for me. I know it is for you, for the city manager, for all of us. So we'll deal with it the best and the most legal way possible. As far as the sign, Councilman Wilcox, they are being made. It's a good idea to do that. And just one thing about intersection closures, we brought it to you because you have much more contact and communication with the public than we do. So we do respect what you say. If we decide to go with full closures, it's going to be very fast, less expensive, and we want to make sure that we have the best possible detours available so people will not get confused. And any detour really in this case would be a very short distance to go around. It's not a matter of driving 1 or 2 miles. But we would certainly like your discretion and your view and direction on that one.
Thank you, Henry. The mayor and I were having discussion. At times, it seems as though more recently than not, we're having to go out and look at brand new roads that haven't been finished right, that are cracking, that have this problem, that problem. So here again, let's go back to value for money. You know, the lowest bid isn't always what we're looking for. We're looking for the taxpayers get what they're paying for, not having to come back and repair and, dig up and do all kinds of other stuff.
We certainly agree, Councilman Lamerson, but of course we have limitation of what we can or cannot do as far as the law and the state and federal law, but we will take everything into consideration. You are correct of your statement.
Mr. Palladine, do you want to comment on that at all? What our requirement is?
As it was discussed, our procurement policy or rules are not just lowest bidder. We go with what's called lowest responsible and responsive bidder. And so when we put out a project like this, we look not only at price, but we look at, as Henry was saying, past performance. We look at whether the bid itself is responsive. In other words, if it's a balanced bid. And so there are, I don't want to call them subjective, but there are other tests that we apply to make sure that we get the best qualified contractor for the price. So we don't always go with the lowest bidder. We will disqualify, for lack of a better term, non-responsive bids if they're unbalanced. In other words, if people are trying to sort of do a workaround, which then may lead us to, for instance, change orders or amendments that ultimately drive the cost up over the life of a project. And we also will look at responsible bidders, meaning have we had experience with this bidder in the past, good or bad? If we haven't had experience with this particular bidder, what other cities have or municipalities have dealt with that particular bidder, and what's their experience been? And so staff makes a judgment call, and then obviously brings it to the council. And if we don't go with the lowest bidder, the council memo will explain why, and it'll address some of those issues.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Orr.
Steve, I know it's going to be beautiful when it's done.
Yes.
I'm excited about that. And thank you for working with the Downtown Partnership Group. So on Marina, you've got parallel parking there by the county.
Correct.
And right now, it is diagonal. Well, it's kind of like helter-skelter, like you said. It's where somebody just pulls in.
Correct.
Is there no way to do the diagonal there also so we don't lose those parking spots?
We did look at that through the design, and there just isn't enough width for a sidewalk, diagonal parking on both sides, and a lane in both directions. There just isn't enough width there. So we did look at that. We did try to get that as best we can. One of the other goals of the project was to align the intersection better through Gurley. So we were trying to do a lot of geometry to make everything work, and this ended up being the best overall solution.
So when you say we're losing some, how many?
Approximately 10.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, depending on how many cars you can count through there, if everybody parks really good, you can get upwards of 19 spaces through there. If people park randomly, or you get one guy parks parallel or not quite on the right angle, you can get down in the 10 spaces. It's a dirt shoulder.
Yeah.
And no pedestrians. You have to walk behind the cars in the travel lane.
It's
not a
very
real
unsafe.
safe
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay.
area.
Just good to know how many.
Yes.
And thank you.
Sure. And to amplify Mr. Hash's and Mr. Lamerson's comments regarding quality of work, when we have a contractor go back out and repair something that was not to our standards and specifications, we're not paying for that. The contractor is under obligation per the contract to meet our standards, so it's not costing us anymore.
Thank you. I'd like you to say that one more time. Sure. Because for some reason, folks out there don't hear what we're having to say. We're not always just spending their money
Correct.
And then not making people be accountable for what they didn't do right.
Correct.
And maybe, Steve, on the good one, when we get to the
Yes.
good one, we can make up those 10 spaces.
Absolutely, and the goal is to have a net gain with all the downtown projects as we go through. This one just happened to be the one that
Right.
we couldn't quite gain.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilman Blair?
Can we see if we can get some, I guess you'd say some clothing on that utility cabinet on Gurley Street?
That is part of our program. It would be separate from this project because of the art nature of it for the control cabinets, but that is something that we're looking at to do on Goodwin at the other intersections. This intersection at Gurley and Marina, and then if council approves a capital program for next year, when we work on the Gurley Street corridor, we'll be looking at doing that at the same treatment for all the signalized intersections.
I think it's important. I think I've got a lot of feedback on the one we did out in front.
Yes.
And I think it's important that people understand the heritage and that we do something with those ugly cabinets, and it's a good way to dress up downtown.
Absolutely.
Councilman Lozelle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is to John. I know that staff is required by law to look at things responsive, responsible, bid, but as a legislative body and stewards of the taxpayers' money, if I was, say, not satisfied with a prior job from a contractor and it never was completed according to my liking, and I voted no, am I violating a law by denying the contract to that contractor?
No, I think that the analysis would be whether you can articulate sort of the reasons why you don't. Really, what you're saying is I don't agree with staff. I don't think that particular bidder is a responsible bidder.
Because of past?
Because of past performance. That's what staff looks at.
Okay.
Either experience we've had directly with that bidder, or experiences other cities or counties have had with the bidder. Some bidders come out of the valley and we check their references, and if Avondale says, yeah, this company was a nightmare, that may affect our decision. Now, we get obviously the specific facts and issues that they dealt with. Some bidders have a tendency to be real low in the upfront, and then all of a sudden, by the end of the project, it's change order, change order, change order, change order, change order. And at the end of the day, it sounds like one of those songs. But anyway, so that's just like that. So I guess the point is that you go on. I think the engineering or the public works staff goes on their own firsthand experience with those bidders on past projects. And by the way, it's not just past projects as a whole. It's past projects that are similar to the one we're talking about. So there are some contractors that are great when it comes to pipes and underground, and
well, I guess
not great on streets.
John, my point is, if staff comes with a recommendation and I don't like it, and I vote no because I'm not satisfied with some past jobs, can I legally, without getting the city sued, say no. I'm going to vote no.
Yes, you can, as long as you can articulate it and it's in fact true or factual. You know, you're protected as a legislator with essential legislative immunity. The city is protected from sort of a defamation type claim, as long as it's true.
And I wouldn't
No, but I mean, my
defame the
point
person.
is sometimes we've been threatened in the past with some contractors where we laid out why we didn't go with that contractor. They sort of saber rattled and said, "Oh, we're going to sue you for defamation because you said, you know, you said these are the things that we did wrong with this other project." Well, those in fact turned out to be true and defensible. So the only caution I would say is make sure that you can, if you say something, make sure it's true or factual. If you want to talk to the public works staff ahead of time to confirm your thoughts or opinions, then I would recommend that before sort of shooting from the hip and saying something that may lead us down the wrong path.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Here again, John, thank you for some of your clarification there. You know, Prescott isn't like the valley. Our topography is different. Our temperatures are different. There are things up here, there's underground springs are different. I can remember sitting here in this particular room not too long ago, listening to somebody say they didn't know there was any rocks under the dirt. You know, fact of the matter is, you know, we live in an area up here that sometimes, simply because you're the lowest bidder, simply because you've got a lot of experience down in Phoenix, doesn't make you qualified to do your work up here.
When we're talking responsible bidder, if we have, and somebody is the lowest bidder, and we have not had experience with them, we look at their experience with other communities on similar projects. Like I said, some are great at pipes and sewer pipes and water pipes, not so great on streets, and vice versa. We do have sort of, I don't want to call it a local, it's not a local preference, but a local familiarity points when we hire engineers and things for, so that it's not a local preference, but if we know that, and that's where I think it's you know, that much more important is with the engineers that we hire, and we obviously have more sort of discretion because that's a request for a proposal. We're basing it on qualifications. When it comes to construction projects, the price is a requirement or a fact that we have to consider. And so I think with on this particular project, like on a Larkin, you know, you look at the lowest bidder, and if they've performed well on similar projects, you know, the whole purpose is to protect taxpayers so that there's no patronage or favoritism. Well, we want to go with this guy because we like him more versus that guy who's actually, you know, a capable and lower bidder. So that's the point. That it is not our competitive bidding process is to protect the taxpayer dollars, not the contractors. So we do and we've dealt with this with Henry on a number of projects. They do a very thorough vetting, I can tell you, because when they have issues or questions about past performance, the legal department is involved in those fairly deeply to make sure that if we're not going with the lowest bidder, that we have a defensible position.
Here again, thank you, but here again, with regards to some of the local contractors, etc., they have every excuse in the world to know that we have underground springs, and they know, for example, when they're putting in things that may not be seen by people out of Phoenix or Mesa or wherever, why, you know, it's an ice skating rink out on Copper Basin twice a day during a couple of periods in the year. Same thing out on Willow Creek, because you got those underground springs and it turns it into an ice rink with drainage and water and stuff like that. And sometimes they know things that folks from outside of the community would not really have access to that kind of knowledge.
I understand that, and I guess I would just say is that you know, when we present the bid documents to the potential contractors, they all have the same engineering documents, they all have the same ability, they are all required to go to the pre-bid meeting, they're all entitled to ask questions for clarification during, you know, prior to the bid date, that's the due bid date. When there's a question that comes in, that question then goes back out to everybody with the same answer. So everybody's working off the same information. You know,
I would hope so, John. I'm just, you know, I don't want to, you know, go on and on it. But fact of the matter still remains, there are things about an area like Prescott that in the mountains with certain kinds of rocks, etc., under the dirt in this area that are not the same as what you would find in other areas.
Understood.
And sometimes when we set up the bid specifications, what I have seen in the past when we've had the comeback orders or whatever the case would be where they want to add on, that's what they're called, add-ons, and it's because that the information wasn't clearly qualified in the bid specifications that this is, and our engineers know that. The people that work for the city that should be in making up this stuff should know that. So I just sharing that with you as far as a thought process.
and understood. And, you know, and quite honestly, I would say, I don't know what percentage, but when we do these projects, I think the vast majority go to local or regional type contractors for the most part, simply exactly for what you're describing. It's not because we're giving them favoritism or giving them a local preference. It's simply because that's the type of contractors we get because they are familiar with the topography, geography, hydrology, or whatever the other one is. Some other G.
Any more questions, comments from the council?
If I may, Mayor, the answer, Councilman Blair, as far as the wraps for our boxes, thanks for bringing and supporting us with that idea. We have the second one ready, has been actually been sitting in the shop for a while. This is, I believe, Cortez and Gurley. We're just waiting for the right temperature. It's ready. The next one, we're going to work on it by Hacienda Hotel. Since we have our own city staff working on it, it's a great thing. It's a bit slower. What I would just like to add all this conversation is just remember, we are really looking very carefully into all the past performance and qualification. And Councilman Lozella, you know, I think my job is, you know, to get a good understanding of my policymakers here and the city manager and my staff. And I hope we do not put you in the position to vote no. I think we're all going to be in it together. So we need to follow the law. So you know that we have a required pre-bid meeting. I mean, regardless of where people are from, Phoenix or Chicago, if they're going to bid in our project, they're going to come to our office. We will share all the information we have. We have test holes and so forth, plans for all of them. So they will all have the same information to bid on. And, you know, big boys, they can decide on their own. But in addition to want to serve you and our citizens best, frankly, a bad contractor is a nightmare for me and my staff. I don't want to deal with it. If nothing else, for my own selfish reason, then I'm going to ask your help to disqualify bad, because I don't have any more hair to lose, and I don't want to, you know, deal with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? He's got a tie on. He must be running for something.
Had a meeting with the judge over at the courthouse, so I told him he actually got me in a tie today. Phil Good, 3022 South Park. I just wanted to briefly mention that as the vice chairman of the Yavapai County Republican Committee, our headquarters is right there at 112 Union Street. So there are very few retail associated businesses on that street. We've got Lindquist Realtors, Marici and Associates, the Union Station on that side. And our preference probably would be to close that intersection and get the job done as quickly as possible. I don't really think it would have too much of an impact on our visitors. And as long as that Union Street parking section had some circulation allowed, we wouldn't have any objection to that. So just brief comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that is the plan, to provide parking circulation maybe not through the intersection, but it'll be just, is this working? At the flat spot on that island in the middle of Union, we would have circulation through there to keep people moving in the parking, because a lot of people from the courthouse use that for juror parking, business parking, so we want to keep everybody moving. And if there's, we'd like to, is there any other questions? So I have one last one.
Any further questions from the public? No.
Just want to summarize what I've heard to make sure we get a clear direction. From what I've heard, Gurley closure is not on the table.
Total closure, yeah.
Marina for short periods, and the Union intersection, if it can speed up the construction, would be the preferred way to move forward with the project.
I think that's what I heard.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure we're all.
Questions. So
Yep.
Steve, Mayor Pro Tem reminded me when we were talking about a skating rink. On that, there in front of the Elks and then on
Yes.
down, that is just a nightmare when we get snow or ice or water that freezes. Will this pond, whatever you have up there that's
Right.
going to retain, will that keep some of the water from going down?
Yes, Councilwoman. That is part of the idea, is it will retain the water, let it percolate into the ground, get some of the water quality, water pollutants reduced before it flows down
Be
further.
able to direct some of the moisture that's on the rooftop there to that? On those buildings over on that side?
We'll take a look at that, and if it's not already included in the plan, we'll see if there's a way to make that happen. When we do the Gurley, yes, when we do the Gurley project, we'll be looking at that Elks Hill and see if there's anything else we can do to improve the slope, reduce the ice buildup, and try to improve the traction on that. But that'll be another project.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next item.
Item C, fiscal year 2017 mid-year budget report.
Thanks. Now I know what you do with all your time, lawyers.
Thank you, Mayor. This is our mid-year budget report. It's a little later this year because of everything we have going on, but feel free to interrupt me as we go through this. We'll try to keep it as short as we can, but again, it is a full budget. So as we get started, I wanted to give you just a visual of the makeup of the budget for 2017. 45% of our budget is capital, 55% operations. That's citywide. And that's 30% personnel and 25% other in the operations. So through the year-end expenditures through December of 2016, in those three categories, you can see we're 46.3% spent in personnel. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get into the individual funds. Non-personnel 39, capital is at 12. So we're only 29% spent, but a lot of that is related to the timing of capital projects. There always seem to be more in the spring. So our operating funds are split. 38% of operations is in the general fund. Of course, that's the public safety, parks, library, and government. And then we have our restricted funds, or our special revenue funds, which are the streets and bed tax, and of course the enterprises make up the rest of it. We talked a week or two ago about the revenues citywide, and just to clarify, 73% of our revenues we collect are restricted. They are restricted for a particular purpose, and again, not available for any governmental purpose. The revenues on the left of the screen, the state shared sales tax, general sales tax, property tax, and franchise tax are all available for any governmental purpose that the council chooses to allocate them to. Looking at the general fund, this is net, these departments net of their individual revenue that's specific for them, like charges for services or fines or things like that. And as you can see, public safety is 75% of the general fund, police and fire there. general government, library recreation. We also included in this graph, which we haven't done before, the transfers to the governmental grants and the airport for operation purposes, because that does come out of those generally available revenues. So we felt it was important to include. Looking at detail of each of those items, and you can see several of our departments are not near the 50% mark of the year. General government, of course, we have a couple significant positions in there that have been basically eliminated with vacancies, so that's kept it down at 39%. Community development is at 42 as we go. Recreation, the other one to note is the fire department is at 52%. The reason that one is over is related to how we budgeted the SAFER grant. It was budgeted as a whole year, even though the SAFER grant didn't start till halfway through. So before we finalize the 17 budget and bring in the 18, we will have to do a reappropriation to move appropriation to the fire department to cover those expenditures. Of course, economic initiatives is down again. That's because of the elimination of a position in there. And then the last one is the governmental grant matches and airport transfers related to operations. And those are significantly below the projection. And as we look at those different areas later on, we can talk more about why they are where they're at. Then we also have capital in the general fund. A lot of those projects, a big part of that project is our CAD system, which was just entered into, which will be proceeding the second half of the year. And then, of course, the capital governmental grant matches and the airport capital match are contribution from the general fund, which is at 71%. Again, capital isn't as evenly distributed in a year as operations is. Looking at revenues, we have pretty good revenues this year. The first group of revenues on slide 8. The local taxes are coming in above budget, which is good. This, of course, is the last 6 months. The next 6 months will be the first 6 months collected by the state and transmitted from DOR. We're hoping we will not lose tax as we go through that, and we will be diligently reviewing that to make sure that does not happen. Then we have our state shared revenues, the state shared sales tax at 46. That's about where it is in distribution every year. We receive about 46% of what we're going to receive the first 6 months, and the last 6 months we get about 54. So that is not an area to be concerned with right now. Income tax, we know exactly what we're going to get there, so that's right on. And vehicle license is actually above the projections we got from the state. Miscellaneous and interest earnings, you can see, is relatively low. The reason for that is with the changes in the market and the fixed investments that we are in, certain changes in those investment values had to be recognized. So it is just lower interest in this first 6 months of the year. We expect that to equalize a little bit as we get into the second half of the year, based on the fact that the market has moved and those adjustments have been made. But that gives us our total unrestricted revenues, which we talked about again a couple of weeks ago, which is available for any governmental purpose, right on projections basically at 50% halfway through the year. The rest of the revenues in the general fund are related to specific purposes, the library district, which of course we get in February and March of the year, so that's why we haven't received anything there. Licenses and permits are below. Again, that's because $350,000 of the budget was related to the business license, which didn't start till January, so that's the second half of the year. You take that out and it's right at close to 50%. Service charges are about on track, and then the fines and forfeitures are kind of whatever they are depending on violations that are happening. Overall, though, especially if you consider the licenses for business license revenue projection, revenues in general fund are right on track at about 50%. We've talked a lot about fund balance.
Mr. Mayor, if you go back real quick, Mark.
Sure.
I got a question on two of those lines.
Sure.
One is the library district. How much do we pay, does Prescott pay for the library district?
Okay, on the library district, this one here, the amount assessed to Prescott residents is, as I recall, 700 or 800,000. I don't have the exact number.
Okay, so
I could get that
it's not
for
a
you.
dollar for dollar exchange then?
No, it is not. It's based on a formula that the library district has based on gate counts and collection size
Okay.
and those type of things.
I guess my other question on that is, the fines and forfeitures, is that a number we come up with, or is that just a historical number that people screw up and commit something that we've got to fine them for, and it averages 400 grand a year? Or is that something that we look at and like next year, well, let's try for 500? I mean, how did we get that number?
We do not have quotas or anything like that in relation to parking tickets or other types
So
of
that, I mean,
fines.
that's parking I don't know what that fine is.
Yeah, it's parking tickets, moving violations, audit penalties, I believe, is in that one as well. It's various fines, and to answer your other question, again, no quotas or goals or anything there. It is just looking at historic trends and doing an estimate.
Okay.
So that we can have a complete budget.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Greg, on the library district, in addition to that $565,000 we get, our library also gets a substantial amount in value in terms of services from the district, software, automation, interlibrary loan, all
And then
kinds
also
of
being
things.
part of the library district, which is a book exchange and everything like that.
Right, right. So I don't have a dollar figure on the top of my head, but I know there is one being generated to
Okay.
give you a better idea how that balances out.
Thank you.
Okay, the next slide, slide 9, we're looking at fund balance because, again, it's been discussed extensively, and we always do look at it, but I've got a little more detail on this slide than we usually do. Looking at the operations, operating income versus operating expenses at the top of the screen here. And let me just mess it up so you can't see it. The top of the screen, you can see we budgeted operations expenditures about 1.7 million below operating revenues this year, and we're coming in right about that 1.7 year to date. The rest of it was capital, which used some of the reserve. So we actually looked at reducing our reserve by about 1.5 million this year for capital projects. And currently to date, though, because of the timing of the capital, we're actually adding to the fund balance at this point by about 900,000. So through December, we have fund balance of about 30 million in the general fund, 30.5. Bottom of the screen is the detail of the fund balance, and we talked about this again a few weeks ago, but we have the operating policy reserve of 6.6. We have some long-term obligations for 3 million. So the internal loans primarily to the golf course, some reserve for capital projects, which is an assignment or a commitment by council policy, and then we have that unassigned about 15.6. Next fund we're looking at is a restricted fund or the special revenue fund for streets. Again, sales tax is coming in above our projection. Through the end of December, sales tax activity was about 3% over the previous year, which is a good growth number. We hope that continues for the rest of the year. Again, it'll be a little hard to track as we switch to DOR collection and accumulation of those numbers for us. Highway user revenue is at 48%. Again, there is additional funds the state put aside for distribution and HERF that will be coming in the second half of the year, and we believe that'll bring that up to where it should be. The partnering projects depends on those timing of the projects. Those are primarily flood control projects that are from the flood district. And then, of course, the streetlight fee is pretty easy to estimate. That's why we're right on track with that one at 50. And then the interest issue, of course, brings our interest down. The first 3 categories under expenditures are all operating, basically. But as you can see, the personnel is right around 50. The other items include operations, but they include maintenance on streets and chipping projects and striping projects and those type of things. So there is some timing based on the year there. That's why that's only at 36. Debt service timing depends on the type of loans, and these are actually 2 MPC bonds we did for streets projects. MPC bonds pay interest in December and principal and interest in June, so that's why we only see 23% at this point. Open space was a commitment council made. For the future, nothing's been spent this year, and then the street capital outlay was budgeted at $30 million, $5 million, 5.1 to date. Again, well below, but again, that has to do with timing. We just saw some projects that are coming forward, so that will be more in the spring of the year. So the impact to the general fund today is that we have a general fund balance of $24 million. We budgeted the year to end with basically using the fund balance if all the open space was purchased this year. But again, it'll be timing on the projects, and as we get into the budget process this year and do the 5-year plan, we'll be able to give you a better projection of that. The bed tax, we have here, again, good receipts this year, 55% of the projected amount, so that bed tax is doing a little better than overall retail sales. Liquor licenses are due in December, so those are basically all collected already. And then again, the interest issue you'll see in all of our funds. These are the projects that council approved back in August, I believe, and some of them depend on the time of the year that they happen, but that's where we are spent as of the middle of the year. With that, again, we're budgeting the fund balance at about $95,000 by the end of the year, but that was with the appropriated fund balance of about $300,000.
Mark?
Yes, Councilman.
Not that I'm picking on this particular organization, it's a wonderful one, but refresh my memory, did we approve something for Charlotte Hall that went above their budgeted item that I can't remember?
They have do have a multi-year contract with Charlotte Hall, and then there was an additional, and then part of the contract also provides for us to pay for some water for them. That's why it's slightly above what was budgeted.
Okay, thank you.
The next slide, slide 12, deals with our impact fee funds. These are our governmental impact fees, not the utility impact fees. And as council will remember, back in 2014, during the rate setting process with the new rules from the state, it was determined that none of these would qualify under the new rules based on the projects we had and the timing put on us by the state. But we still do have balances in these funds, which will be discussed more extensively during this year's budget process as we look at the 5-year capital plan. Parks has some definite plans that we looked at last year during the budget. We'll more formalize those this year as they are getting closer. And then again, fire, police, and library all have significant balances.
Mark, so those monies, it's been a while since we've dealt with the old impact fee rules. Is that allowed for operational?
Absolutely not. It can only be used to expand capacity of the infrastructure. So parks would be additional vehicles? Ball fields, no, unless it was a new patrol route and you needed another squad car, not for the replacement of a squad car.
What now, our geographic area that we've annexed, would that not count as expanding a patrol area?
If you needed to add another patrol and needed another patrol vehicle for that, yes, you could include that.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, there's a few of these categories where a decision has to be made sooner rather than later. Is that correct?
That is correct. With part of the legislation on impact fees, some impact fees were just categorically not allowed anymore. And when that happened, it was required that they be spent by 2020. And the one we have left that has a balance in it is the public building category. So we do need to spend that $172,000 by 2020.
Could that include some new chairs for the council?
We are actually looking at a project for the public of the council chambers.
Nice.
Any other questions on impact fees? The last of our governmental funds is basically a roll-up of all the rest of them that we haven't looked at. We have grants, as we talk about all the time. We have significant grants. We appropriate for significant grants on the hope that we will get them. We broke them down into two categories, operating and capital. As you can see, we're obviously haven't gotten as many as we had hoped we would get. Hopefully we'll get more in the second half. The operating grant, of course, does have the SAFER grant in it, so we will see more spending in the second half of the year. Acker Trust is the scholarships that are done by the Acker Board. Those are always in the second half of the year. The miscellaneous deductions have to do with gifts given to the city. A lot of wills and other things give money to the city for specific purposes, especially our library. We budget what's available in that fund for those departments to use those as they had been intended by the donors. So we have 65 so far, 66. We're going to see more the second half. I believe the library is undertaking a project to get more efficient lighting with LED lighting that's going to be using part of their gift funds. Our debt service fund is very small at the city because we only have one GO bond that still remains, and that'll be paid off this year. And then once that is paid off, we only have one special assessment bond left, which is extremely small, which goes on for a few more years. So that fund will be getting much smaller as we move into the future.
So Mark, the $255,084, is that Friends of the Library? Is that where that money comes from, or just individual?
Some of the is from the Friends of a Library on, I believe, a position that they are funding. They fund through this, or part of a position. A lot of it is from wills related to the parks, related to the Shop with the Cop, related to trail adoptions and other things like that.
Got it.
The next funds we're looking at is our enterprise funds on the water enterprise. And as we go through water, a lot of the comments we have here are similar to in wastewater, so I won't waste your time going through them in too much detail. As you can see, halfway through the year, 49% of the water revenue is in. That's right on what we would expect. We had a small rate increase in water in January, so we should be able to make up that 1% differential between that and 50 on the second half of the year. Alt water is actually above. We need to look at how we're projecting that as we get into next year. The water connections have to do more with how many times property are changing over and new properties put on. Aquifer protection fee also went up in
Mark,
January.
can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
We'll go back to the water. You were talking about adjustments in the rates, et cetera. Just for clarification, we just don't go out and raise rates. I mean, there's got to be justification for raising rates.
Correct, Councilman, and we will be, this rate increase that we just had in January was the last that was approved by council. Last time we did a rate study, you adopted 3 rate increases in sequential years. And we will be looking at a new impact fee study and water rate study as we get into the new budget process to get started. Those studies take a long time thanks to the new impact fee law.
And I appreciate that. You know, it's very similar to what we were talking about a little earlier with some of the other things that we do. We just don't sit up here. You guys just don't bring to us, well, we just need more money, so let's go do it. That isn't the way it happens. It has to be justifiable, and there are laws governing what we can use as justifiable.
Exactly. Good point, Councilman. The last 3 revenues that we have up there are growth related. There are system impact fee, our water resource fee, and our partnering. The impact fees are a little harder to project these days because, as you know, we have 10, I believe, 9 or 10 different water zones with different fees in each zone. So not only do we have to project what the growth and new development is going to be in the new year, we got to project what zone it's going to be in, because those impact fees can range from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 depending on where the growth happens in town. So obviously we didn't do a great job this year. We're below those numbers. Although we are seeing growth in the city, we will try to do a better job projecting those in future years. The partnering has to do with the Big Chino Water Ranch, and also the tri-party agreement with SRP and the city, or comprehensive agreement number 1, I'm sorry. And the revenues from those come in the second half of the year. We've already received them, actually, a lot of them in January, so that is not anything to be concerned about there. Looking at the expenses, again, the first 3 are operating, related to personnel, non-personnel, and then the debt. You'll notice the debt is much higher than it was in the streets fund. That's because it's a different type of debt. These are WIFA loans, which pay principal in the first half of the year and then just interest in the second half, kind of the opposite of an MPC debt on the way it's recorded. And then our capital projects, again, have to do with timing of those projects as they come forward. Overall, though, we were projecting to end the year with a $30 million budgeted fund balance, and to date, halfway through, we're at $43 million. Again, that's because a lot of those capital projects haven't happened. Wastewater, a lot of the same issues. The rate increase in January was slightly higher. It was like 2% for the water users, and it was about 5% for the wastewater. So, you know, we're at 48. We expect that to be right about where it should be as we have slightly higher rates in the second half. Effluent sales are very driven by weather, of course. Those are sales to the golf courses around town for water. So as we've had a pretty wet year, that's why sales are down there. And then the impact fees, I believe there's only 9 wastewater districts, but it's hard to project growth in building permits alone, let alone where it's going to be in town with such a variance in the fees. The bond proceeds, you'll see, is at 1%. Again, that has to do with the timing of that capital project, and there's added complexity with WIFA loans as we are trying to get this WIFA loan finalized. There was actually 2 WIFA loans, a small one and then a new one. We'll be bringing that back to council hopefully in the next few months, but it's tied up in an environmental assessment right now and comment period. It does question, though, whether we'll be using WIFA into the future. We may need to switch to an MPC financing, which is our Municipal Property Corporation. Expenditures, again, the first 3 related to operations, about where we'd expect to see them, with debt service again being WIFA loans here, so you're seeing a higher percentage in the first half of the year. And then the capital projects, the same as before. Henry brought you a bunch of capital projects that you're going to be awarding here in a few minutes, which will help bring those numbers up for the second half of the year. Budgeted fund balance of $8.5 million. Again, year to date, because of the capital projects not being in progress yet, is 12.8. But again, we expect them to come in a lot closer to budget this year. Solid waste revenues are at 47%. Again, you just did a rate increase in January for them as well, first one in 10 years. So those revenue projections are pretty accurate, we think. Transfer station fees, we do a projection on those, but again, that's all dependent on who drives through our transfer station. So it is subject to kind of the market, if you will. The landfill closure and other fees are all part of the bills. Operations, again, the first 3 related to operations are at 48, 45, and 20. This debt is another MPC debt, so it pays principal in the second half of the year. The 115 is exactly what will be spent this year, and that was for an upgrade to the transfer station a few years ago. Capital projects deal with vehicles and those type of things, which I believe you have also on the agenda later today, some other capital that will be coming out of this fund. Again, the fund overall looks like it's coming in right where expected. The airport fund is actually doing quite well related to its revenues. We have to work with them this year, make sure we have good revenue projections. Obviously, overall operating revenues are 54% of budget, which is great. We'd like to see that better than under budget, but we also like to have as good of projections as we can. Expenditures are well below levels as well, including the ARF and operations out there, and personnel. Of course, one of the positions that was eliminated recently was 75% charge to the airport, so that's adding to that lower than budget at this point. The capital projects are cut into two groups there, basically the grant projects and then the other capital projects which were brought forward and paid for out of the general fund. So as you can see, we budgeted to have $939,609 out of the general fund for the year. To date, we're at $588. We'll have to see how the rest of the year goes. And again, with the, as you might remember from the general fund sheet, with revenues 53,000, forgot what fund I was in, 53,000 above where they were expected to be, and expenditures 87 below. Our operating transfer has only been 16,000 or 14,252 this year. So good news in the airport fund. The golf course, we don't compare it to budget because, of course, we contract with Billy Casper Golf to manage our golf course. So it's really more of a retail driven by the market, if you will. So we compare it to last year at this time. As you can see, looking at just the operations, which is our pro shop and our golfing operations, we're $22,818 better than we were last year. And looking at the restaurant, it is also about 29,000 better, almost 30. So we're bottom line of the whole golf course, we're $25,000 better than we were last year at this time. They have had several challenges the last 2 months with weather. So we're not sure where we will end the year, but halfway through the year it was looking good.
Oh, Mark, sorry, just to clarify, that 22,000, is that Billy Casper's profit or is that on our balance sheet?
It is our profit. Billy Casper is just the management company running the course. Obviously, there is some performance pay relation to how well they're doing for revenues that may kick in at the end of the year. That could affect how much of that profit we get to keep. But it's the whole year as a whole, so it's a little hard to project halfway through.
Okay, thanks.
As you can see, I do project, it's on this slide, the Billy Casper half year is $42,000 for their management contract. But again, there are some performance measures if they achieve certain levels. Last of the funds is basically our internal service funds. These are funds that do work for different areas of the government. So the actual expenditures here are shown in the other funds we've already looked at. It's almost a double accounting here. But our engineering fund had a deficit of about $80,000 for the first half of the year. We're working with them to figure out what they're not charging out to the various projects they're working on. Facilities had a $46,000 deficit. That's more related to the capital projects that were front-loaded in the year. As you can see, they did $107,000. So there's nothing to worry about there. And fleet as well, we're going to be working with them to figure out why they're at 72 at this point of the year in a deficit. Their debt service is MPC debt, so it is loaded to the second half of the year. So we definitely want to get it on this before we get to the end of the year. Risk management fund is basically being spent out. Again, the council will remember we were self-insured up until 2013, as I recall. So we have liability claims that are spending out and the balance in there, and then we're running our payments to the pool, the government risk pool that we're in now through there, just as a way to accumulate the funds. But again, it's a lot more stable now that we're insured through the risk pool. So with all that excitement, we can look forward to 2018 and some of the challenges or opportunities for improvement that we will have as we move forward. This is a slide we've probably seen too much of lately, but MPC cost, basically we do have significant increases related to our unfunded liability. Police, just the Tier 1 and Tier 2 contribution rate will be going from 72 to 85% of pay, and fire will be going from 75 to 91, 92% of pay. So we have an estimated additional impact next year of about 1.2, 1.3 million, just related to that increase. Again, not news to anybody in the council since we have been discussing it. Other things that we're looking at, obviously we talked about the revenue growth, 3% through December. That's good. We're hoping that continues. We don't see at this point a reason why it wouldn't. So that would mean additional revenue for next year of about $550,000 general fund, 1.1 citywide. We have property tax sheets came in from the county last week. Our capacity is up by 59,000. That's our 2% increase, and new construction. We will have state shared revenue in a few weeks. Projections from the league. We expect those to be up. I'm not sure how much at this point. We will keep council informed as those come in. And of course, we have the taxable construction contracting bill changing the way that is taxed in the legislature right now. If that does pass, that would be a decrease to our sales tax revenue. Again, we are watching that and providing data to our legislators and our lobbyists to hopefully defeat that. Expenditure, obviously the increase in PSPRS, 1.25. We're looking at a health insurance cost increase of approximately 230 citywide, about 128 in the general fund.
Can I just, when you said there was a potential decrease in the sales tax from the state, what did you mean by that? Dollars and cents, percent?
If they change the proposal for construction contracting, we are working with the league to get an overall projection of what that means. Because of the complexity of the proposal, it's a little hard to say what that is.
So this is something that's coming from the legislature?
It's a possibility. It's in the legislature right now.
And that's something here again that this particular legislative body has no control over. However, we're going to have to deal with it if indeed it alters the collection rate that we get back from the state.
Yes,
right?
Anytime the legislature starts messing with our tax base, as a city, our tax base, it affects our revenue.
All right, so here again, just trying to point out, it's an external influence on something that, for example, we're going to be potentially asking the voters, we're going to the voters in August to ask them to take a look at our taxes, etc. And this is on the outside of that. So while our taxpayers may choose to increase or not our tax rate, we're still going to have to not only deal with that decision, we're going to have to deal with this decision that the legislature may put upon us.
Of course, and any future decisions they might choose to put upon us. Obviously, council expressed an interest for the continuation of the market compensation plan. We have a preliminary estimate of that there, $435 in the general fund. We've been doing some, city manager's been doing some reorganization and elimination of positions for some significant savings. That's all kind of still in the works, but that's going to decrease those expenditures, so that's a good thing. And then we're also looking at alternative service deliveries, which we've talked about, which also have the potential to increase future expenditures. So with that,
Mark, can
yes.
Mayor, so basically what you're saying here, Mark, in order to maintain our market compensation that we put in last year for our employees, it will cost in the general fund $435,000, and then citywide $750. That's
yes. Those are preliminary estimates. I'll have better estimates, a couple weeks from now when we get the final projections in. But I wanted to be able to give you just a general idea today.
That, yeah. That's good to know.
Yeah. And then I wanted to finish up with the budget calendar for this year. It includes the items in red or the public workshops. Obviously, the departments have been working on their budget for 2 months now. We have deadlines almost every week, if not every other week, through February and then into March. The next council workshop on the budget will be the early part of May, and then there's 2 of them in May for the council workshops. And then the public hearings and consideration of the budgets will be in June, with consideration of the property tax in July. And again, that is the end of my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any other questions that you may have.
Any questions, comments from the council?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, if I could request staff to come May, I would rather not have a big picture. I'd like to see some details on the first meeting that we can take with us and look at it.
Details of
budget
of the individual departments, or further?
Yeah, I'd like to see closer than just an overview, because it seems throughout the year we get things brought to us that we see when we approved the budget that we otherwise said, well, it was in the budget. Well, I want to see those things that were in the budget.
Okay. Yes, definitely. We will have all the capital projects and stuff, but we can give you.
And donations and blah, 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 and all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Orr?
Yeah, I guess, Mayor, I'd just like to make a comment because of all the conversation that's been around the tax initiative that will be on the ballot in August, and also the PSPRS unfunded liability. When I look at what you presented today, Mark, I think it's what we've been saying out there is that the city is in fine shape. I mean, we have met our projections. We're in really good shape. The only issue we have is this unfunded liability. If we pull that away from our general fund and are able to take care of that with another revenue source passed by our voters, that we are in really great shape as a city. And so I just want to make that, because we are not in dire problems. We're basically in fine shape. We just need to take care of that one issue.
Yes, good point, Councilwoman.
Any other questions, comments from the council? Any from the public? Well, thank you for coming, everybody. We'll start again in about 25 minutes.